Now let's move on to the next topic, land invasion. The city of Cape Town in South Africa as a whole has experienced a significant rise in land invasion incidents. The land invaders seem to operate in a very planned and systematic way, where hundreds of shacks are built up in a matter of hours. What are your thoughts on this phenomenon?
So let's go back to the beginning of time and how people secured themselves large pieces of land. It was through war.
Okay.
So if you look at the early travelers, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the British, the Dutch, those were the early travelers that traveled the world and claimed land. And they did it through war. What we're seeing today with regards to land invasion is a modern form of war. And because society has become very politically correct in its mannerism, we're allowing it.
Okay.
And I've got a principal issue with it rather than a moral issue with it. The principal issue for me has got infinite issues with regards to our future. Now, you know, if you look at the opposite of black is white, if you look at the opposite of light, it's dark. If you look at the opposite of work, it's not being lazy, it's being depressed. Because if you haven't had a job before, you're going to find yourself in a position where you're certainly going to be depressed because you don't have a job. Now, the reason why we work is so that we can put a roof over our head. If we're teaching people that it's okay to steal a roof over your head and to take land, what we're essentially doing is teaching them not to work.
Okay.
And if we're teaching people not to work, we're going to have a depressed, poor society that's going to have huge entitlement issues. And what happens to a kid or a person if they can't get what they want without working for it? They throw a tantrum. And that tantrum is going to come in forms of, and I mean, we've already seen it with some of the behavior around the country from everybody. It's if you don't get what you want, you throw a tantrum. And we throw tantrums in burning things, blocking roads, stopping the economy, killing people, raping people. That's how we throw tantrums in our country. So I've got a principal issue with the land invasion, and the principal issue is we're teaching people the wrong thing.
Okay.
And that is, come get what you want, don't work for what you want.
Okay. Some claim that the High Court's ruling prohibiting the anti-land invasion unit from demolishing or evicting anybody from any dwelling during the national state of disaster without a court order has led to an exponential increase in land invasions. What impacts do you think this will have in the long run on our country as a whole?
So one of the big things that you always need to consider with regards to natural resources is migration patterns of people.
Okay.
And if you look at the migratory patterns that are currently happening with regards to land invasion, is you get guys that are now historically from the Eastern Cape and or rural areas around South Africa moving to the urban areas because that's where their resources are. Now they're moving, and this sounds very strange, but they're moving in these migration patterns because resources are UIF, resources are grants, resources are maybe one or two casual jobs that they could possibly get, and resources are, of course, they can do all of that without having to pay for any land. So we're setting ourselves up for probably resource collapse in certain areas in our country, because the migration patterns that are happening now with regards to land invasion is to urban areas that are already under lots of pressure. Now, the reason why I feel that government has not stopped this is simple. Is if you're going to find yourself now in this pandemic in a position where you can't do what you feel you want to do, you're going to think less of the government, and the government's going to become very unpopular. Okay. So right now what they're doing, and the strategy behind this from government, is popularity. They're just trying to get popularity, that's all. But there's no sustainable thought processes in this, because what happens now when the national disaster actually ends? are people going to now claim the land that's already been invaded back? And with what force is that going to be claimed back? Because it inevitably belongs to whomever. You know, a lot of, and what people don't necessarily understand right now, and I hope the government possibly understands this, is that a lot of the land that's being invaded actually belongs to cities.
Yeah.
You know, it's not necessarily private owned.
Yeah.
That's the only time you actually hear about it. But a lot of the land that's being claimed now belongs to cities.
Yeah.
And how are they going to claim that land back when their dams are empty and when they run out of power? And they need to re-migrate people to where there are actually resources. And yeah, so I think their move has been short-sighted.
Okay.
I just can't understand how up until a couple of months ago, you weren't allowed to travel across border, all right, in a legal way or across provinces, but you can come from the Eastern Cape and go put up a settlement for yourself in Joburg or in Cape Town. But yet the act in itself, never mind to get to the land invasion, the act of traveling across provinces is illegal.
Can I make a little thing, can I bring a little fact to your
attention?
Yeah, to your attention. Many people who actually invade land in the townships or wherever are mostly backyard dwellers. So it's people who maybe migrated from the Eastern Cape a long time ago and they didn't quite qualify for an RDP one way or another, or they did get an RDP and then they sold it, and now they're going back to putting up even more shacks. So what are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think, you know, like I said to you earlier, the government needs excuses right now, you know. So if they mismanaged the migratory patterns before, they are now just mismanagement even more. I mean, the sanity was definitely not on the forefront of the thought process when you are allowed to sell your RDP house. It makes very little to no sense that that was ever even allowed. So I think for what we are sitting with now, we might land up in some turmoil in the very near future when the disaster status actually ends and people and cities and municipals want their land back.
Yeah, and also these people don't have water, they don't have electricity, they don't have sanitation, and what is that going to lead to?
Yeah.
More strikes and more territories and all of that.
Well, and it goes far further than that. You know, you've got health issues, which leads to pressure on our health system and our hospitals, which are already under severe pressure, because government has had no intentions over the course of the last 24 years to build hospitals. They built clinics, and I also think, you know, that's part of the big reason why government was so quick to act on the lockdown, was they knew they would be exposed very negatively in the course of the following 6 or 7 months, because they hadn't built new hospitals. They only built clinics, and clinics aren't there to actually deal with this type of pandemic.
Yeah.